Hey everybody, Damien from Bay Ridge DIY here. In this week's video, we are going to be adding some dust collection to my panel saw. This is a safety speed cut panel saw. It's a great saw, I really like it. It's got the Milwaukee power head on it. It works really well, the only problem is it creates a lot of dust. I do have the vacuum port hooked up. It still throws a lot of dust out the sides, so we're going to be adding some brushes to the top and sides, and that should collect the dust. We're also going to be changing the back panels here. I got some thin paneling on here just to hold stuff from falling behind it. Works well, but we're going to make it look a little bit nicer, dress it up a little bit. Stick around, I'll show you how we do it. We get started by moving the tensioning knob to the other side of the bracket. This will make way for the brushes to be mounted to the front of the saw. The brushes I use for the front of the saw are concrete finishing brooms. They work good. They have a nice wood top and a coarse brush below. I mark out the holes of some pre-drilled angle brackets to mount the brooms to the front of the machine. Then I drill all 6 holes out and use some small bolts and nuts to mount the angle brackets. I get the broom positioned where I want it on the front of the saw. On the angle bracket, I mark out the top hole onto the wooden part of the broom. After the hole is marked, I use a 5/16 drill bit to drill a hole where it will mount to the angle bracket. I drill another hole 1.25 inches down from that and connect the outsides of the circles with a pencil line. I'll use my jigsaw to cut this out. This will allow the broom to slide back and forth on the mounting bolt. You'll need to bore out the factory hole in the L bracket with a 1/4 inch bit. Then, take a 1/4-20 stove bolt and press the square end into the metal bracket using some washers and a nut. This will keep the bolt from spinning when you tighten the wing nuts that hold the brushes on. Now that the bolts are in place, you can mount your brush to the front of the machine. It goes on very simply and tightens up with just a couple 1/4-20 wing nuts and some washers. Now all you have to do is loosen the wing nuts for different thicknesses of wood. On the other side, we're going to do the exact same thing. I'll speed through the process so you can see how I did it again. One thing I did find easier when doing the second side was I mounted the bolts to the angle brackets before mounting them to the saw. The last piece is the broom that will go on top. I mount this with some 3/4 inch screws in some holes I drilled in the housing. You do not need to make this broom adjustable. The next step is to cut a new backing for inside the frame of the panel saw. Right now I just have some 1/4 inch hardboard on there. I am replacing the 1/4 inch hardboard with some 1/2 inch plywood. This will give us a nice stable back and keep the dust from going behind the machine and any thin pieces from curving behind the machine also. Once all my panels are cut, I remove the 1/4 inch hardboard backer from the frame of the saw. While I do this, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to our channel by clicking the button below. With the old panels removed, I can start to install the new 1/2 inch panels. They fit snug. I'm using some 1 inch self-tapping screws to install these panels. The 1/2 inch plywood still gives plenty of clearance in the rails and fits on the inside of my tape rule that's mounted on the second rail. When using this saw in the past, I noticed that a lot of dust collects at the bottom of the saw and where the saw blade runs up and down. So I'm going to build a channel, a small box in the back to collect that dust, and put a port on the bottom. With some scrap 1/2 inch plywood, I cut down some 2 inch by 6 foot pieces of plywood. I then cut down some 12 inch pieces of plywood also. I screw these together. It doesn't have to be anything real fancy, it won't be seen. I use a PVC 4-inch to 3-inch reducer to act as my dust port on the bottom of this box. After tracing the circle, I cut it out with my jigsaw and fasten it into place with a couple screws. To mount the dust box to the back of the saw, I fastened some 3-inch plywood wings to the side of this box. I climb behind the saw. It's a tight fit. I clamp the box to the frame and shoot it in with some 3/4 inch screws. I shoot screws from the front and the back to hold it in place. The last step is to hook it up to my dust collection system. I make sure to leave the blast gate low enough that I can reach it from the ground. So I finished up with the dust collection for the panel saw today. I like the way it turned out. I got my chamber in the back that I wanted to collect any dust that flies back there. I got my adjustable brushes on here so I can pull them out when I have to push the saw all the way down. These also help stop anything from flying out both ways, and it keeps a lot of the dust out from the back of the saw by adding these wood panels here. Another thing they also do is they catch the boards if they're turning in. Sometimes when we cut some thin plywood, 1/8 inch plywood on here, they tend to push in and they get stuck when they hit these cross members. So that's why I added this plywood to both sides. I think it looks pretty cool too. It keeps the dust out from the back, like I said. I went through and I taped off any gaps that were on the saw. That just keeps the dust from blowing around, kind of creates a little bit of a vacuum chamber in there. I hope you enjoyed the video, hope it helps you. If you have a panel saw, I think you could do this to just about any brand panel saw. This is a safety speed cut, but I think any brand you could do something similar to this. Please check us out on Instagram, Bay Ridge DIY. We have a lot of different tool tips and woodworking tips that we're putting out. And make sure to subscribe below, click that little button, and let us know how we're doing. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Until next time, have a good one.